These are the locators which we have discussed in the previous classes. Most of the times we use these locators, and these locators can be changeable. Whenever a developer introduced a new change, or if he changed some position of the elements, or if some attributes of that particular element in the web page, definitely these locators may be broken. Most of the times, our locator should be uniquely identify that specific element. In order to identify that element specifically and uniquely, we will go for XPaths. We'll go for XPath. Very important concept. Almost 99%, I can say, you can think of 99%, we will use XPaths. XPath with options we will use whenever we are trying to find any element. Instead of this ID name, class name, tag name, link text or partial link text, you can also use this. There is no restriction that we want only to use XPath, but I prefer to use XPath because XPath definitely identifies the element wherever it is, in which page it is. Very important. XPath finds dynamically changing elements on complex web pages. Very important point. XPath finds dynamically changing elements. Dynamically changing means their locators can be like ID, name or class name, link text, tag name, CSS selectors. There may be a chance that they can change dynamically. But even though that element changes its attributes dynamically, we can identify those elements by using XPath. Then what is XPath? What is XPath? XPath is nothing but an XML path. XPath is nothing but an XML path. When I say XPath, as like other locators, it is also a locator. So when I say locator, it is an address. But this address is specified with expression. When we say ID, you will just simply give one word or name, class name or tag name, link text or coming to CSS selectors. But XPath is an address. This address is specified by using an expression. What is that expression? XML path expression. When a web page is loaded, it generates DOM structure. I can say DOM view. By this, you will not understand anything. Yet to understand this particular image. This is the HTML code which we have written. And when we are running this HTML code in a browser, browser generates DOM view, document object model view. And it tries to display the page in this way. This is what we are seeing. This is the HTML code which we have written. And when we are loading a browser, that browser generates this HTML code in the form of this DOM view, document object model view. And at last, the person who are using or the client who are using can see in this way. This is the HTML code. This is the view which we are seeing in the browser when a browser is loaded. But if you observe here, DOM, document object model, acts as an API between HTML and rendered view. Coming to XPath, since it is an address, you will write that address in XML path expression. So when I write XML path expression, when a browser is loaded, DOM view is generated. So this XML path expression is used to find the elements in the HTML DOM structure. So XPath works here. XPath can be used to navigate through nodes. When I say nodes, it is nothing but tag name. In HTML, we call as tag names, but in DOM, we call the same as nodes to find elements in the HTML DOM structure. Simply ID, name, class name, tag name, link text or partial link text, as well as a CSS selector, which is a combination of ID, name, class name, as well as tag name, used to find the elements in the HTML code. But coming to XPath, when we write an locator, which is nothing but XML path expression, XPath, XML path expression, it finds the elements in the DOM view. When a browser is loaded, it generates DOM view of the HTML code. So upon observation, I can say document object model is an API interface provided by the browser. If you observe, it acts as an middle layer. When we are discussing client server architecture, we have UI layer, API layer, database layer. In the same way, API acts as a middle layer between UI as well as database. In the same way, if you observe, DOM here, document object model here, acts as an API interface provided by the browser. Browser generates DOM. Chrome browser or Edge browser or Firefox browser or any browser generates this DOM view when a web page is loaded. Very important point. Other locators may fail, but XPath will identify definitely that element wherever it is, whichever it is on the web page. Other locators may fail in finding the elements, but XPath mostly preferred, which is effective, will definitely identify elements on which location it is, whatever the element it is on the web page. Very important point. So that is the reason 99% I prefer XPath to use. Not only me, everybody prefers XPath. Then, what are the types of XPaths we are having? Coming to types of XPath, we are having absolute XPath, relative XPath. Mostly preferred is relative XPath. There are two types of XPaths, absolute XPath and relative XPath. But coming to locators, mostly XPath is preferred. And in XPath, the second type, relative XPath, is mostly preferred. 100% most of the times we will use relative XPath. Anyway, we will use most preferably use XPath, but in XPath also we will prefer relative XPath because syntax is very easy. I will make you understand whenever we are trying to write a locator, and it directly jump to the element in the HTML DOM structure. So you just observe this particular image. When you write an absolute XPath, it starts from root node, root HTML node. So when I say HTML, the HTML code is in between this HTML tags. So this HTML is nothing but a root node. If I want to write an absolute XPath, definitely I have to start from root node, but it is not the case. Coming to relative XPath, you can directly identify the element in the middle itself. By this, you will not understand anything. Let me take to you one website and let me make you understand. Before that, we will see some differences. What is absolute XPath? What is relative XPath? We will see. Since absolute XPath and relative XPath both are locators, we will write the locators as like ID, name, or CSS selectors, tag name, or link text or partial link text. Similarly, we will write the absolute XPath as well as relative XPath also. Whenever we are writing, absolute XPath should start with root node. When I say slash, nothing but this HTML, root node. But coming to relative XPath, it starts with double slash. Starts from root HTML node, so long XPath, if long web page. Suppose if you take any website, let me take nopcommerce.com, you can take any website. if you can see in this particular website, this is the element which I want to find by using absolute XPath. If I want to find the element from absolute XPath, let me inspect this element. And if you can observe, this element is at last page, and we have to write our absolute XPath from root HTML node to up to here. So in head, we have a body. In the body, we have a div. And in the div class or in the div tag, we have multiple divs. And in the div, we have again multiple divs. And in the divs, we have user list. In the user list, we have list. And in the list, we have links. So let me copy absolute XPath so that you can understand how long it is. Copy full XPath. If you can see the XPath here, this is the XPath. So this is one of the difference. It starts from root HTML node, and thereafter it navigated in the HTML. We have a body. In the body, we have multiple divs. So in the body, we have multiple divs. If you can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 second. In the body, we have div of 6. In the div 6, if you can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Or you can see like this. Div 6. Is this will fine? Control F, Control F. Yeah, that is the another thing. Yes, you take this particular thing. In the div 6, let me try to Control X. This is div 6 because we have multiple divs in the body. This is div 6. In the div 6, we are having div 4. See, this is the div 6, division of 6. See, out of multiple divisions, you can see here div 1, div 2, div 3, div 4, div 5. In the div 6, I am having this particular element. So in the div 6 also, you need to go again inside div 1, div 2, div 3, div 4. In the div 4, you have multiple divs, div 1 and div 2. And in the div 2, you need to go off div 2 again, right? And in the div 2, you again have user list. And in the user list, you have this particular link. So if you see, this is absolutely long XPath. And you need to start from parent node to child node. And inside the child node, you need to go like this. In this way, you will write absolute XPath. But coming to relative XPath, starts from middle of the HTML DOM structure. Very important point. It starts from middle of the HTML DOM structure. So no long path, long XPath is required. Even though web page is long, it does not require long XPath. How you can identify this particular element? So let me try to copy the element which I want to have the relative XPath. If you see, this is the relative XPath. Maybe you will not understand what is normalized space. Allow me some time. This is absolute XPath and this is relative XPath. If you observe, absolute XPath is very long and coming to relative XPath is not long. Instead, if you observe, absolute XPath starts from root HTML node. Relative XPath starts from or contains double slash. That's it. And if you observe, this relative XPath which we have written directly identified the element in between. This is a large HTML code. In this large HTML code, this absolute XPath directly jumped into this element. But this is not the case with absolute XPath. Any element you have to start from root node. So when a web page is long, definitely will have large absolute XPath. But even though a website is very long, we don't have that problem with relative XPath. So we use only tags or nodes in the XPath. Similarly, we use tags or nodes with at least one attribute. There are elements in the web page and each element has a tag name and each element has certain attributes. if you observe, absolute XPath, we have not used any attributes. But coming to relative XPath, we have used one attribute. What is the attribute? Link text. This is one attribute that I have used with normalize face function. This anyway you will not understand. You will allow me sometime so that you can understand. Don't worry. So the difference is we will not use any attributes in the absolute XPath. We will use at least one attribute in the relative XPath. Very important. And coming to syntax, if you observe this, this is the HTML code. So in the HTML code, when you are writing absolute XPath, definitely you have to start from root HTML node. So I can think this is of parent. Inside parent, you have head and body. So when I say this is parent, these are nothing but childs. So again, in this body, you again need to go inside the body. You have multiple divisions like div1, div2, div3, div4, like this. So what is the syntax of absolute XPath? It starts from HTML node. Anyway, it is a parent like here. And inside the parent, you need to go to navigate to child element. And inside the child element for this parent, again, you need to have grand chain element. Like if you observe this, root HTML is the parent. For the parent, this is the child for HTML. And for this HTML only, this div is the child of the body, which is a grandchild of HTML. So likewise, you need to navigate to elements inside the elements for finding an element. But if you observe the syntax, what you have done, you have just specified the tag name starting with /, and thereafter you will specify any attribute for finding that element. You can think of in this way. So again, I am writing here, what is the syntax of relative XPath? Very important. Listen it carefully. Again, I'm writing here. First, it starts with /. Nice. Thereafter, if you want to find any element, you need to first specify the tag name of that element. And open square brackets. Inside the square brackets, you need to specify attribute. And for every attribute, you will have value. This is the syntax when we are writing CSS selector. But coming to XPath, which is relative XPath, you need to specify @ attribute. This is the syntax of relative XPath. If you don't know what is the tag name of that particular element, what you can do, simply instead of tag name, you can specify star. But most of the times, you use the syntax with tag name only. You can also use this. There is no problem. Let us try to go to this particular website. According to this syntax, we will write one XPath. You just try to take this particular element, or you can take off this search store. This is the search box. You can try to identify this particular element. And if you can see, this is the HTML code. So for in this HTML code, you have a tag name. Input is the tag name. Type, class, autocomplete, name, placeholder, area label are the attributes. For each and every attribute, you have certain value. Right. I want to identify this element by using relative XPath. If you observe, I can identify the element by name also. Then how can I identify that name, that element with XPath? That to relative XPath. If you want to write absolute XPath, again it is a long thing. First you need to start with root HTML. Thereafter you need to have the body, and in the body you need to go again into div, and in the div there are multiple divs, and inside one of the multiple div you have form. Inside the form you have input. No need to write that much long XPath, but go with relative XPath. So as per this syntax, first we need to specify the tag name. Let me write it here. Starts with always relative XPath starts with /. Agreed. And thereafter, for every element you have a tag name. What is the tag name of this particular element? Input. Then you need to specify open and close square bracket, and inside the square bracket you need to specify any attribute, not only name. You can also specify autocomplete. You can also specify type, class, ID, area label. You can also specify anything. Let me take area label. So @attribute is equal to value. So before that, you just specify that attribute is equal to what is the value. You need to specify that value in quotations, whether it is a single or double quotations. So for area label, you have set to store. This is the attribute, this is the corresponding value. And before attribute, you need to specify @. This is relative XPath. Very simple. You can take this and copy it here, and you can see, you can find it here. This absolutely identified this particular element. Very important. This is the way how we can write absolute XPath. But if I don't know the tag name, what I can do? I can simply specify instead of tag name, I can specify star. When I specify star here, it also identifies the same element. So tag name you can use, like in the CSS selectors, tag name is optional. Similarly, you can also use tag name, or you don't need to use the tag name. It's upon your requirement. So if you can see here, this particular locator also identified the same element. So relative XPath starts with /, and we need to specify the tag name, and inside square brackets I need to specify attribute. For every attribute there is a value, we need to specify that. In this way you can identify any element. I prefer XPath, that to relative XPath. To understand this, let me create one example. Let me create day 20. The day 20, let me create Python file of XPath. So when you are writing any automation script, definitely you need to import WebDriver from Selenium package. From Selenium, import WebDriver. From Selenium dot WebDriver. In the WebDriver you have common method. In the common you have by. So you need to import by. This is common for every automation script. It is common. That's it. So thereafter, in the WebDriver you have Chrome options, nothing but desired capabilities. And just I am assigning these Chrome options with a variable like opt, or you can take options also. You need to give some meaningful name. When you are assigning a variable, you need to give some meaningful name. That is very important here. So in the options, I had experimental option. In the experimental option, I can specify detach for making the browser window open all the time until unless I give close command. And I'm initializing a driver variable. Before that, in the WebDriver, I have Chrome browser. In the Chrome browser, I need to specify desired capabilities. So these options is the argument to this Chrome. I am just specifying value to this options argument in the Chrome browser. I'm just specifying that or initializing it to a driver variable. With the help of driver variable, I can perform all the actions. So first action I will do is I will open the URL. What is the URL? demo.nwpcommerce.com. After opening, I need to maximize the browser window. So if I maximize, if I don't maximize also, there is no problem. But if we maximize, we can identify the elements exactly. Otherwise, even though that element is present, there may be a chance that we can get the exceptions. And definitely, you need to use implicit wait. Let me give some specified time of 10 seconds. Don't worry why I have used this implicit wait. Whenever we are discussing waits, you will get to know what is implicit wait. For now, you just try to specify implicit wait after maximizing the browser window. And the other thing is, after opening this particular website, I need to find this website or find this particular element, and inside this search box, I need to enter some, suppose t-shirts. This is the text or this is the thing which I want to search in this particular search box. or anything like Samsung mobile or any item you can search here as like in the Amazon. After searching, you need to click on this search button. First, what we will do, we will try to identify this particular element by using absolute XPath search box, and similarly search button by using absolute XPath, and thereafter we will identify the same element with the help of relative XPath so that you can understand the difference. How long the absolute XPath is, how easy the relative XPath is. So I have opened this particular website. Thereafter, I need to identify this particular element. For identifying, what you can do, you can just inspect this. Right click on this particular element and click on inspect. If you observe, if I want to write absolute XPath, definitely it should start from HTML node. And definitely in the HTML node, you will have the body. Let me write that locators here, absolute XPath for that particular element. Set to store. Just writing absolute XPath here. I am not writing relative XPath, absolute XPath. Very important concepts. So always absolute XPath starts with root HTML node. So in the HTML, we have a body. So I can specify HTML/body, and inside the body, again, this particular element is located inside this div. So it is of div 6. So inside the body, I have multiple divs. Div 1, div 2, div 3, div 4, div 5. And after div 5, I have div 6. Yes. So this is the sixth division. So I can specify that which division it is inside square brackets. This is, so inside the body, there are multiple divs, like 6 divs. So inside the sixth div, the element is present which I want to find. And inside the sixth div, again, I have multiple divs. Div 1, div 2, div 3, div 4. So inside div 6, I have div 1. And inside div 1, I have again multiple divs, div 1, div 2. So inside div 2, the element is present. Inside div 2, the element is present. And inside div 2, again, I have two divs, div 1, div 2. I need to specify div 2. Inside div 2, again, I have div 2. And inside div 2, I have form. I need to specify the form tag name as well. And inside the form, I have input. This is the element which I want to find. If you copy and find that element in this HTML, Control F, Control V, it identified this element. See, from root HTML node, you have to navigate to all the childs or grandchilds, and at last you will find that element. See, at the time of writing, by common sense, I can say, I can miss any tag also. If I miss any tag, definitely this XPath may return or will not find the element which I want. So whenever writing absolute XPath, there may be a chance that missing any division tag. Or you can think if in this way. Another disadvantage is, suppose if I change that location from here to here, then definitely this input is also maybe placed in some code. Whenever I am writing automation script, that element is present here, but developer has made some change to this particular website and he has put this element in somewhere in this web page. Definitely the location is changed, and the absolute XPath which I have written can be broken. So this is the two disadvantages. So what are the two disadvantages? Or I can say why relative XPath is mostly preferred. You can think of in this way. What are the disadvantages of absolute XPath? Or an interviewer may ask a question in this way: why relative XPath is mostly preferred, or why XPath is unstable? If a developer introduces a new element or changes the location of the element, then definitely absolute XPath will be broken. By common sense, I can say if I change out this location, definitely that address also will be changing. So the address which you write before will not be able to find the element after changing its location. So absolute XPath is unstable and relative XPath is mostly preferred because relative XPath directly jumps to the element in the HTML DOM structure. That what syntax what we have seen. And this is the absolute XPath. If you see long XPath, and there may be a chance of missing any tag also, but I don't want to take this risk. Even though this particular XPath, absolute XPath, finds this particular element which I want, there may be a chance it may be broken, but all the times it should work. Even though the developer has changed its location, or even though it is a long page, I don't want to bother. Once I write that locator, it should identify that element always. For that reason, I will go for relative XPath. Let me identify the same element with the relative XPath. Before that, let me try to execute the same with the help of this automation script. So in the driver dot find element, not find elements, by XPath. Up to now we have seen ID, name, class name, link text or partial link text or tag name. Now I am just finding that element by using XPath. So whether it is a relative XPath or absolute XPath, it is nothing but an XPath. So that is the reason why I have specified the locator name as XPath. And you can specify that locator here. So this is absolute XPath locator. And after specifying, since it is a text box, I need to enter some value. For entering the value, I can use send keys method. So I can use send keys, like you can use send keys method for entering the values in the text box, send keys. So I can pass any value. So let me pass some random value. So Lenovo Idea Center 600. So this is the laptop or the PC which I want. This is some random text which I can pass to this particular search store, search box element upon identification. So let me execute this particular script. You can observe it has identified this particular element. Even though it is an absolute XPath, fine, absolute XPath also works and identifies the element. And thereafter it entered the text in this particular search box. How I can, after entering the input to the text box, how I can search that particular item. So for searching, definitely I have to click search button. So I need to identify the search button also. Go to this e-commerce website, click on inspect. If you can observe, in the div 6, in the div 1, in the div 2, inside the div 2, you have a form, and inside the form, after input, you have button. So search box as well as search button are present inside the form. So this is the absolute XPath for search store. And I can say inside the form only, this particular button is also present. So inside form only, that button, search button is also present. So instead of input, since it is a button, I will perform the click action. Definitely I have to use button here. And after inputting some value, definitely after finding that particular button, which is a search button, I need to perform the click action. If you see, after entering some t-shirts or some any random value which you want, definitely I will perform click action. If I perform the click action, associated results will be shown here. For the t-shirts, I don't have any results, so that is the reason it has shown nothing here. So let us try to see what are the results it will show upon clicking that button. But if you observe, the main point here is we have identified that element by using absolute XPath. Let me execute this. Yes, it has identified that element and it has entered some value, and thereafter it has performed the click action. Let me execute one more time so that you can understand. Let me use time.sleep. Let me pause for 3 seconds. After identifying this element, after entering the value, after 3 seconds, I need to perform the click action. Let me execute this one more time so that you can observe the difference. It has entered, yes. After entering, it has performed the click action on the search button. Thereafter, it has shown the appropriate results. In this way, you can identify element by using absolute XPath. Then, how you can identify the same element by using relative XPath. Let me write here. This is absolute XPath, and this is relative XPath. Let me change the locators also. Let's see, instead of this absolute XPath, I need to write relative XPath. Go to this particular website, go to home. You can see this is the home page, and inside the home page, definitely I want to identify these two elements, or not only these two elements, you can also identify any element. Let me inspect this, and if you can see, this is the HTML code of this particular element. We have seen it before. The syntax of absolute XPath is relative XPath is tag name, which is after double slash. Thereafter, in the square brackets, I need to specify any attribute which we are seeing here, and I can specify its value. So in the same way, how I can write this? Definitely it starts with double slash, and I should specify the element tag name. This is the element which I want to identify. This is the tag name of that particular element. So input is the tag name, and after tag name, I need to specify square brackets. And inside the square brackets, I need to specify any attribute. I can use like autocomplete, name, or placeholder, anything. Like let me take type. This is one of the attribute. Type is equal to, it is having text as a value, and this attribute I need to specify at the rate before. Let me copy this. Let me identify it here. Control F, Control V. So if you see, this particular element identifies, or this particular locator identifies this particular element. This is relative XPath. Very simple. When you compared with absolute XPath, it is very simple. The length is also very less, and I no need to bother if, even though if a developer introduces a new element, definitely this relative XPath identifies that element. Even though we changed the location, I don't have any bother issue. I can identify the same element wherever it is, whichever it is. So that is the reason why I prefer XPath, and most probably we will prefer relative XPath. And let me use this inside this relative XPath to specify that value here. It will raise an error here. Why? Because inside double quotes, again you no need to use double quotes. Inside double quotes you can use single quote, or inside single quote you can use double quote, but inside double quote you should not use double quote. Inside single quote you should not use single quote. So for this, let me try to make this as a single quote. So in this way you can remove that error, and thereafter, after entering some value, I need to identify the search button also. If you can see here, in the same way, I can write the relative XPath for this button. This is the element. So this is the HTML code. So by using relative XPath, I need to find this particular element. So relative XPath starts with double slash. I need to specify the tag name. Tag name is button, and after button, inside square brackets, I need to specify attribute. Any attribute I can use. You can have link text also, or inner text. Sorry. And instead of inner text, I can use type. So type is equal to, inside quotations, I can specify the submit, and every attribute should have at the rate. If you can see, if after specifying at the rate, it identified this particular element. You can use this particular locator. This is nothing but a relative XPath. Paste it here, and in the same way, you need to specify that in single quotes. Comment this absolute XPath. Run with relative XPath. It opened, it identified that element, it entered the text, thereafter it performed the click action, so appropriate results has been shown. In this way, you can identify multiple elements by using relative XPath, not with absolute XPath. We should not bother about absolute XPath. And instead of writing this, how you can directly identify by using some third-party tools. So go to this Chrome, search for selector sub. This is the Chrome extension, selector sub extension. So go here. So every time you no need to write relative XPath, but knowing how you can relative XPath is very important. After you are knowing, instead of every time you need to write this relative XPath, definitely you can go here, search for relative or selector sub, and you can have here add to Chrome, because I have already added to Chrome, so that is the reason it is showing remove from Chrome. I have already added. So with the help of the selector sub, you can identify any element on any page by using selector sub. Suppose you can take this here. This is the element which I want to identify. If you want to identify that element, you can just right click on, go here on this particular element, mouse over on this particular element, just right click. Upon adding that Chrome extension, you can see here selector sub option. And this selector hub having pro version also, but this basic version is just required for doing things. So for this element, what are all the options present, whether it is having ID, name, relative XPath, CSS selector, all the locators it will able to give to us. So I can copy name, ID or anything, but most preferably copy relative XPath. See, 99% I prefer to use XPath, and that to relative XPath. You can see here copy relative XPath. The same element I have copied relative XPath. If you can see here, it has provided the relative XPath. You can copy this and you can search it here whether it is working fine or not. Inspect. I have copied that locator by using selector sub. Control F, Control V. See, this particular locator also identified this. I have not written this. Instead, I have used a third-party tool like selector sub for finding the element. Similarly, you can find this element also, like selector sub, copy relative XPath. You can see it has given unique locator. Similarly, you can take this particular element. I need to find this element, copy relative XPath. You can see it will give the relative XPath. So this tool identifies uniquely any element. It will give directly that locator for every element. You can take this, right click, copy relative XPath, and you can have that element is highlighted. So in this way, you can combine multiple XPaths also for identifying that element uniquely. Likewise, CSS selectors, you can also use multiple XPaths also. So in this way, you can identify any elements on any web page, whichever it is, wherever it is, by using XPath.